And this is a short video on replacing deuce-and-a-half brake line, flexible brake line that is a transition between the hard brake line and the wheel drum itself. Now this is a 1965 deuce-and-a-half, and we reckon that it was most likely an OEM product. This thing had been rusted in there so hard you can see where the wrench is stripped out. This was a line wrench I used here, and it stripped the nut anyways. Gratefully, we have this attached to this device here, so we was able to take this bracket off and get it pried apart by applying heat to it. But you'll see that this is blown apart here. Right there it is. That's where it was originally touched, going in there. When we tried to get it, we just couldn't get it because the wrench slipped off of there and busted my hand a little bit, and likely busted my son a little bit somewhere when he was working on this thing on Friday, Christmas Eve morning. But a friend got this thing busted apart here. But the interesting thing is that for him to do that, he had to apply the heat on this side right here to get it to bust loose. When he applied the heat, this line was stuck up, compressed in there, and it exploded off of here. He said with a very loud boom, like a gun going off, he said. And that was very interesting to me because what you're going to notice here is that this line has a lot of different parts to it. But I've talked to some mechanics about these lines, and what they say is, of course, on the inside, and you can see on this one perhaps, you'll see how small that is. There's 2 or 3 parts to it, I guess. But apparently they can collapse onto themselves and stop the flow of fluid to your brake. And that was what happened on this one, was that I was bleeding the brake lines, the brake drums, and 5 of my 6 drums bled out just fine to relieve the air. But this one here, I got nothing out of it. And after talking to some people who's a lot more knowledgeable in this than me, they said, yeah, those things can collapse on themselves. And sure enough, that's what happened here. This thing here, when he's trying to get it apart, Mr. Steve, then it exploded because it was the air up in there became very hot and expanded with enough pressure to explode that line off of there. Probably the heat had something to do with weakening it too. But fortunately, we was able to get it loose. And like I said, on this side, you can see where it's totally stripped out the threads in here. Even using a line wrench, which is made to go over these hex bolts, and not strip them out. This thing was on there so tight it stripped out, and when I was working on stripping it off or getting it off, the wrench come loose out of my hand, come loose off of this, and then it went, and my son got hit somewheres on this thing. He was on one side of the axle, I was on the other side of the axle working on this beast. But anyway, what we did was we took this bracket off here, which is going on to the top of the axle there on your deuce-and-a-half, and then to get this end here off, we had to just simply screw it out with the freed up brake line. And then I tried some more things on it myself, tried to break it loose, and I couldn't do it, so I took it to Mr. Steve, who's kind of a hobbyist in this and works on rebuilding rods and stuff like that, and he had an idea on how to do it, and it finally come apart for him, because I want to reuse this bolt right here on the end, and I'll put that onto my new replacement part here and use the bracket. And I'll probably reuse this little clip. There's a little clip in there somewhere. You can kind of see that clip There's your clip right there. I'm gonna probably take that clip off of there, because the one that come on this one here, it got bent up and boogered taking it off. Because I was unaware of how they did this. To me, it makes sense. This is going back here behind your metal piece, and you put your clip up here to keep it from moving that away. But what they've done, what the military did on this design, actually it's a Kaiser Jeep design on this particular one, they put this rather large nut here, which happens to be 15/16 inch, pretty monster size, and also pretty good at freezing. Got a lot of surface area there, and you're down in the brake zone. But that's what happened there, and that's a story about replacing the brake line on a Deuce and a Half 1965 M35A.